willing to bet that if you're watching this video, you know that Arctic sea ice is melting fast. It's one of the most widely used examples of how human activity is changing our planet. You might also know that in the 1980s, the ozone hole was really the only environmental story in town. But what you might not know is how the two are related. I'm Ella, I'm a polar climate scientist, and in this video, I'm going to show you the power of tackling environmental challenges internationally, and why fixing ozone has meant good news for Arctic ice. If you're new around here, make sure to hit that bell, because there's plenty more where this came from. In climate research, sometimes, just sometimes, you get a bit of good news. And when you do, you've got to grasp it with both hands. A new paper shows that an international agreement to limit ozone depletion has had unintended positive consequences, which is a really nice surprise for those of us who've come to expect the worst. This one piece of legislation has kept global average temperatures about half a degree cooler than they would otherwise have been if we'd continued emitting the chemicals that the treaty bans. Amazingly for the Arctic, that has meant 500,000 square kilometres of sea ice loss has been averted. And all of that is especially cool considering that tackling climate change wasn't even part of the plan. Instead, the aim was to fix a wholly different problem. A problem that originates way high up in Earth's stratosphere, in the ozone layer. Atmospheric ozone keeps us safe from harmful UV radiation. Without it, plants wouldn't be able to grow and Earth would be some kind of barren wasteland populated exclusively by UV-resistant microbes or something. And if it was just, I don't know, thinner, then we'd have much higher rates of diseases like skin cancer, no matter how much Aussie slip-slap-slopping we did. Even if we don't always appreciate it, the ozone layer is pretty fundamental to our lives. So it would be bad if someone discovered that the ozone layer was getting thinner or something, right? I'm going to tell you a story. Are you sitting comfortably? Great. Then I'll begin. It's the early 1980s at the British Antarctic Research Station, Halley. You know the one, it's the big blue caterpillar that keeps having to get moved because of cracks in the Brunt ice shaft. Scientists are looking through printouts of ozone measurements collected over many years at the station. Well, I'm guessing they were printouts. Call it creative license, but it was the 80s. They noticed something pretty odd. Since the 1970s, the amount of ozone in the atmosphere over Halley has been declining dramatically by around 3% every year. This is bad news, and it actually confirms something that the scientists have feared. A few years previously, a trio of chemists at UC Irvine and Oxford University had warned that halocarbon gases, which are commonly used as chemical refrigerants and in aerosol spray cans, could deplete ozone. And now, here's the proof. After double, triple checking the data, the Antarctic scientists asked NASA to cross-check against their satellite data for the Antarctic continent. It's good timing because NASA have just launched a new observation platform into space to monitor the Earth's atmosphere. And to NASA's surprise, they find that their satellites have also been recording a huge drop in ozone across Antarctica every spring. But they hadn't noticed it. Because knowing the range that ozone concentrations should fall into, they've written a helpful bit of quality control code to discard any data below a reasonable threshold. And when they go back and check the supposedly junk data, they find that same glaring hole in atmospheric ozone concentrations. Those three British scientists wrote a seminal paper that was published in the journal Nature in 1985. They showed that chemicals like chlorofluorocarbons, or CFCs, were responsible for the hole. Later, the three chemists who originally identified halocarbons as ozone-depleting substances would also be rewarded with a Nobel Prize. It doesn't actually say if they lived happily ever after, but I'll guess they did. Ozone-depleting substances contain either chlorine, like CFCs, or bromine, two chemicals that trigger a chain reaction of ozone destruction. But it only happens under certain conditions. Atmospheric ozone depletion requires very cold temperatures, just like you get high up in the Antarctic stratosphere. But it's also a photolytic process. Photo meaning light and lysis meaning breakdown. It means that ozone gets destroyed in the presence of light preferentially. So when light returns to either pole in the spring after the long dark winter, it triggers a chain reaction that destroys ozone and creates a hole over the pole that's most prevalent in spring. It's rare in science to feel a tangible link between your work and the real world, but in this case, science was fundamental to the signing of a piece of legislation called the Montreal Protocol. What's that? What's the Montreal Protocol, you say? Only one of the most successful pieces of environmental policy in history. Well, that's what. After that landmark paper in 1985, the world really pulled its finger out to make a change. It was a stunningly quick turnaround. By September 1987, just 2 years later, every single country on Earth had signed an agreement to limit the use of ozone-depleting substances and repair the ozone hole. It's one of the few examples of legislation that was universally adopted. And you know what? It's been hella successful. As a result of that quick action, backed up by good quality evidence, scientists now predict that ozone will recover to 1980 levels by the middle of this century. That's huge. And it's a great example of how international collaboration on a global environmental issue can get positive results. But I started this video talking about Arctic sea ice. So what does ozone high above the South Pole have to do with ice on literally the opposite side of the Earth? The thing is, ozone doesn't just matter because it prevents harmful UV rays zapping us. No. Ozone is also a greenhouse gas that absorbs heat just like carbon dioxide or methane. So on its own, ozone recovery actually warms the atmosphere. Should be bad news for the climate, right? But ozone-depleting substances like CFCs are much stronger greenhouse gases, so the reduction in warming associated with removing them from the atmosphere far outweighs the increases from rising ozone concentrations. Eliminating CFCs has had a profound impact on global temperatures, resulting in about 0.5 degrees Celsius less of global average warming. In the world avoided by the Montreal Protocol, concentrations of these gases rise at about 3.5% a year, thinning the ozone layer and amplifying the greenhouse effect. That's particularly impactful in the Arctic, which is warming way faster than the rest of the planet. The area covered by floating ice in summer, the minimum Arctic sea ice extent, has been declining by around 13% per decade since the late 1970s, and a big part of that is down to temperature rise. So by limiting temperature rise, the Montreal Protocol has had a significant effect on Arctic ice. The 0.5 degree of global average warming that the protocol averted translates to nearly 0.9 degrees of avoided warming in the Arctic. And according to this new research, that equates to about 500,000 square kilometres of sea ice. By 2040, it could stack up to 1 million square kilometres. And that could actually even be enough to postpone the first sea ice-free summer by as much as 15 years. More than anything, this story illustrates that environmental policy can be unbelievably powerful. That's why the IPCC emphasises that policy on climate change is more important than almost anything else, including things like technology or individual action. And as we've learned from the Montreal Protocol, policies can also have unexpected positive side effects. Climate policy is the best way to tackle climate change, but climate policy isn't just about climate. It can also be good for our health and well-being, it can address historical injustice, and it can support development efforts too. Why choose when you can have it all? And if we have coordinated action between and within countries, we can achieve big things. In the words of Mark England, one of the scientists behind this work, this should give us hope and encourage us that action on climate change is possible. Because, if we can do it once, we can definitely do it again. If you want to learn more about the solutions to climate change, as recommended by the world's experts, check out this video up here. And if you like this video and you want to see more of them, please consider supporting me on Patreon. It's the only way I fund these videos and it helps me to keep them independent. Big thanks to all my existing patrons, you rock. Till next time.